Hey there, welcome back. It's Full Live Athlete Pastor Channel, and this is Justin speaking. We're on day 97 of the online Bible reading club, and we are going to be looking today at 1 Samuel chapter 7, 8, and 9, and then we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 9, 18 through 36. So let's get into it. Now, we're seeing salvation history and the revelation of it unfolding throughout the books of the Bible. The Bible is really a library of 66 books, and in it is a lot of history, and a history of God relating to his people in different ways throughout history. In Hebrews 1:1, it talks about how God related to people and revealed himself through various different ways in the Old Covenant, and then in these last days, he's revealed himself through Christ. And it talks about Christ, the book of Hebrews is about Christ, but we're back in the Old Covenant now, and so one of the ways that you see this happen is that all of salvation history is really an unfolding and a flowering of the first promise of the gospel in Genesis 3:15. And remember, man in Adam and Eve had sinned against God, and all have sinned, and as Romans 5:12 through 21 says, have become dead and cursed and sinners through Adam. And we can't keep the law anymore because we are united in union with the prince of this world, the devil. And so what Genesis 3:15 says is that to the devil, the serpent, that God will place the offspring of the woman in enmity or hostility with the offspring of the serpent. And so what happened there with the sin of Adam is that all creation in him joined with the devil against God. But what the gospel says is that God's going to cause people to be born again and transformed, no longer guilty and under the power of sin, but redeemed and set free from the power of sin through the work of a mediator or a redeemer. And this person is going to be the offspring of the woman. And he is going to be like a priest. He's going to guard his people in the sanctuary between God and his people, and he's gonna make the way known like the prophets, make the way known, make the will of God known, and the people are going to follow this way. And he's going to be the king who's going to destroy and deliver the people from God's enemies. And so the people are longing for that leader, that helper for them, because they keep worshiping idols, because they're united to the devil. They keep worshiping false gods. You see, as we get into the text today in 1 Samuel 7, that they're worshiping Ashtaroth and Baals, these tribal deities, these rivals to God. They were tasked with, in Joshua, driving all the nations out, putting the ban on them, but they didn't fulfill that totally. So these nations, especially the Philistines, have been the Amorites as well, have been a real thorn in their side, and they have been attacking them. And we saw last time that the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant. Well, God's never out of control, and in letting his Ark be captured, he brought shame and guilt on the people, but he also is going to demonstrate to the Philistines that he's the true God, and we see that if you go back to last time. But the Ark is now in a random place. It's called Kirioth Jearim, and it's in there, the house of Abinadab on a hill. And so it's there that Eleazar took charge of the Ark, but it's stuck there for 20 more years. Well, in the meantime, the story shifts back to where Samuel is, and Samuel is fighting off the Philistines because God's again bringing the Philistines down on them because they're worshiping false gods. So he tells them to put away the false gods, repent. He offers up a burnt offering there, kind of a sin offering, and the Lord miraculously routs the Philistines in response to the worship. And it says that they were routed before Israel in verse 10. And then it's at Mizpah. They went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them. And so they win the battle, right? Well, Samuel, in verse 12 of chapter 7, creates this altar, this remembrance stone called the Ebenezer. He names it, which is mean that God has been the rock or the stone of my help, or the Ezer is this helper, and that's the same word that's used in Hebrew for the helper suitable for Adam when Eve was created. And God is even called our helper. And that's this offspring of the woman. He's going to send an Ebenezer. He's going to send a king that's going to... So you can't look anywhere in the Bible without seeing Jesus. Jesus is actually the ultimate Ebenezer, who's going to be the true king. And so that people are like dying to get this king. They need more than a rock, like a representation of what happened in the past. They need a king now. A fleshly, living, breathing king like the nations have. And so ironically, they want one like the nations. And so Israel demands a king. They tell Samuel that. And then God says, okay, I'm gonna do it. Obey the voice of the people in chapter 8. He's going to give them a king. Well, Samuel makes sure to tell the people that the kings, far from being like they hope they will be, they're going to actually be a curse to them. They're going to lead them in bad places. They're going to take from them, and they're going to get a very poor return on their investment. The king's just going to take, and not give them. Think about all the taxes you and I pay, and how little we actually get back on that. Perhaps think about that. The king just takes and takes and takes. The governing, the legislature, the magistrate takes and takes and takes, but from us. But do they actually serve us as a gracious ruler would do, like Christ would do? Well, absolutely no. No king measured up to that standard. Okay, but the Lord grants their request, and so he tells Samuel. We don't see it yet, but we're going to see in chapter 9 that the Lord reveals at the exact right time, the next day, there's going to be a man that's going to come up, and that's going to be the one. So here's the deal. This man in chapter 9 is a total, utter, ridiculous example. It's the kind of king that we would vote for. He's tall, he's good looking, he has all that going for him, but he himself admits he's unqualified. He's of the least of the least clans of Benjamin, which is the worst tribe. We've seen how just terrible they are in the end of Judges, etc. But look at this guy. He is horrible, and he is like, you think of David as being the ideal king in the Old Covenant. He's out caring for shepherds, or he's a shepherd caring for the sheep, and this guy is sent from Kish, his father, to go find the donkeys. And you see the first time we see him, he can't find the donkeys. He's like, I gotta go to a prophet and figure out what these donkeys are. Well, the prophet says, hey, you're gonna be the king. He doesn't tell him that yet, but he says, here, eat all this fine food, eat all the best things, and tomorrow we'll see what happens, and that's going to be where he's going to anoint him as the king, the Messiah, if you will. He's the anointed one. He's a type of the Messiah, but he's going to be an evil Messiah. We're going to see that these kings will lead the people into utter ruin, and we'll still be looking at the end of the Old Testament for the king to come. Okay, well, let's look at that king. He's in Luke. And you know what he says? He predicts his death. He's going to be a king not like the nations would expect, not like Israel would expect, a king that's going to give his life. He says in verse 21 of chapter 9 of Luke that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the leaders of Israel, and he must be killed, and on the third day raised to life. That God's going to bruise him, as Isaiah 53 says, for the iniquities of his people. He must suffer, but he will be raised by God on the third day. And he says, whoever wants to be his disciple must take up their cross daily and follow him. All right. And it says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for him will save it. Now, That is our calling, and that's exactly what Saul's calling was going to be, was to lose his life. But we see he just takes life from the people. And that's our situation here today, is we're to be followers of Jesus, denying ourselves in the service of others. Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many, as Mark 10:45 told us. And as you think about that, you see he's infinitely glorious. He's eternal. He's omnipotent. He's all powerful. But you see a glimpse of that in the next verses in the Transfiguration. You get to see Moses and Elijah and John and James and Peter are all meeting with Jesus, and that's because they're all alive, and in a miraculous way, they're all united, though they're separated by time and history. They're all united in the presence of Jesus, and Jesus' face shines like the sun, like he is. His glory is revealed to them for this brief moment, and like, this is it. This is what we're made for, to live in face to face with the glorious presence of God. And Peter and them are like, let's build tents here and dwell here. But no, that's not the way. The way has to come through suffering and through death and then resurrection. You see how it works. The gospel has to be the offspring of the woman, the king, the Messiah, being bruised at great cost to himself to crush the serpent so that we can dwell with God forever. The true king was to come. It's going to be the suffering servant, the true King Jesus. All right, well, that said, we're to the end of the day, and I hope that that's helpful for you, whether you're reviewing this after you've read it or previewing it. We hope that you have seen Christ in these verses and have been encouraged in your walk with him, and that you find following Christ to be a delight. Take up your cross, die with him daily, and so you might live with him and dwell with him forevermore. All right, with that said, if you're watching the end, like the video, share it, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Keep this thing going so that more people can get into reading the Bible day after day and seeing the glory of Christ in it. Peace. We'll see you next time. Take care.